Good evening, viewers. My name is Ayolo Joshua, and I welcome you to the State of the Nation on AsphericTV. The State of the Nation is a program initiated by the AsphericTV to enable individuals, agencies, international organizations, government power status, and private sectors to highlight their achievements and plans in their various industries and to discuss how their plans affect Nigerians. Our viewers can interact with us on this program via our Facebook page, official Aspheric News, on Twitter at Aspheric News, on Instagram at Aspheric.news, and on YouTube Aspheric TV. And please do subscribe to our YouTube channel for more programs. Also, our viewers can send us SMS to ask our guest questions on 080 And our guest today is Mr. Piet Tibane, an attorney in Johannesburg, South Africa, and he will be discussing with us the rights of foreigners in South Africa, amongst others. You're welcome to the program.
Good evening, Mr. Joshua, and good evening to your viewers.
All right, can you quickly introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
Thanks, Joshua. My name is Piet Tibane, as Mr. Ayulua said. I'm an attorney in South Africa, in Johannesburg. I'm practicing in the area of commercial litigation, labor law, and family law, as well as sports-related issues. I must say from the outset that I'm not a human rights lawyer, but I'm a keen observer on how rights are being observed in South Africa. And those that are within authority to observe the human rights. But I'm not a human rights lawyer, but I take a keen interest on that. And that's all from me.
Okay. And over the years, there has been several incidences that occurred in South Africa. What can you say is the cause of it?
I don't have a definite answer in as far as what has happened in the past, but I will assume that you're referring to xenophobic attack that has taken place some time ago. If one is to give his own view, there has been a myth in the country that foreigners are taking South African jobs, and the fact that they're involved in prostitution and drug dealing, all these sorts of things. If you were to ask me, I must say that it's just a myth that we'll need to demystify, because I don't think that is the case. The act of criminality is not an act that can be apportioned to a specific nationality. Where people engage themselves into criminal activity, it cannot be said that it's because an individual is from Nigeria, an individual is from Zambia, an individual is from Zimbabwe. It's an act of criminality. And I must say that we need to demystify the myth.
Okay. What would you rate your government when it comes to the livelihood of citizens and foreigners in South Africa?
I must say, I think they've done their best, but it can never be enough. The issue of taking care of its own citizens, the foreigners, it has to be an ongoing. It's not something that we can say we are where we want to be as a country, but an effort has been made since we entered into our democracy. But lots of things still needs to be done. It's unfortunate that COVID-19 has disturbed so many things, such as economic activity. But I believe that we'll bounce back as a country.
All right. Now let's talk about your field.
Yes.
Being a legal practitioner, what
Yes.
are the rights of foreigners in South Africa?
I should start by saying, in as far as the issue of rights in South Africa, foreigners do enjoy the rights that are enjoyed by all South Africans, except if I were to be specific, the only rights that they don't enjoy is the right to vote or to form political parties. But they do enjoy all the rights. And if I were to be specific again, we do have asylum seekers in South Africa. We do have laws that specifically focus on that. We also do have laws that focuses on foreigners. And as you might be aware, we're a constitutional state, and our constitution has been praised by many all over the world. We do have specific section that focuses on both South African as well as foreigners. For an example, you have the equality, which is provided in section 9, subsection 3, which stipulate that everyone is equal before the law. We also have a right to human dignity, which caters for South African as well as the foreigners. We do have rights to life. We also do have right to access to health, which is provided in section 27. In as much as we do have all these rights, all the rights come with an obligation. It also comes with a limitation. And this limitation is not only applicable to the foreigners, it's applicable to South African as well. Unless if there will be specific rights that you want me to address in as far as foreigners is concerned. But as I have said earlier, foreigners do enjoy all the rights that are enjoyed by South Africans, except rights to vote and to form political parties.
Okay, but do you really think the foreigners are really benefiting anything from these rights you mentioned? Because it seems like there are some little restrictions for people who are not South African citizens.
Yeah, they do enjoy the rights. As you should be aware, each and every country for its own budget or to take off its own citizen, they need to know how many people are in the country. Hence, South Africa as a country, they've introduced Immigration Act. They've also introduced Refugee Act. And they are doing so to ensure that foreigners who come to this country, either for economic reason or running away from their country for the infighting that might be taking place, they are protected. But in order for the country to do so, they need to know how many people from other countries are in this country. And they are doing so so that whatever needs to be done, they are accounted for. Because you will understand that it will be very difficult to have foreigners in the country without knowing how many are there. You will also appreciate that for each and every country to run its own affairs, you have to rely on budgets. And in order for you to do so, you need to ensure that you know how many people are in this country. So for that reason, I must say that foreigners do enjoy equal rights similar to those of South Africans.
All right. Now, back to your profession. As a legal practitioner, have you ever spoken on behalf of a foreigner against a South African citizen, maybe in a situation whereby there's an issue that occurred between the two people? Have you ever spoken on behalf of a foreigner?
As a legal practitioner, I'm not only a practitioner, I'm a conscious legal practitioner. And where I see injustice take place, I do intervene wherever it's safe to do so. Where I can confidently say I have been involved in as far as my profession is concerned, is a situation where certain foreigners were involved in a dispute with their landlord in South Africa, where the landlord during the COVID-19 lockdown, because the lessee or the foreign person was unable to pay for his rental on a monthly basis due to what we all know, which is COVID-19, the landlord opted to take law into his own hands by locking the gate or locking the lessee or tenant outside the building. I was contacted by the said for the specific person to say, I'm faced with this following situation, because I understood that the reason why the person was locked out was due to the lack of money. I opted to engage with the landlord to find a common ground and enter into an arrangement on behalf of the lessee, or to arrange that the payment of the rent would be paid later. And based on that, the agreement was reached. And as we speak, that specific individual was allowed to go back to the house where he was staying. That's where my involvement was. If I were to give you another example, there was another lady who's in South Africa from Ethiopia, who was facing similar challenges with his landlord, and the landlord opted to take the law into his own hands. And I was invited to come in as a legal practitioner to assist. We did approach the court on urgent basis, and we were able to assist the said person to address the issue.
All right. Now, looking at still on that, we understand that most people, when a foreigner is in their country and a issue arises between the two people, some of them take side with the person who comes from their own country. What would you say to such people, and what would be your opinion to people who do such things, since you don't do such?
When it comes to individual taking side based on nationality or ethnicity, to me, that is inspired by a lack of knowledge. And for people who don't know the history of this country, majority of the people from South Africa during the apartheid time, they were housed in various African countries. So it's my view that we might need to start a campaign or awareness of some sort, where South African will be taught or will be taken through to history of what has happened, or how much other African countries assisted during the apartheid, so that at least they will tend to appreciate the involvement of other African countries in defeating the scourge of apartheid that led us to the democracy that we seem to enjoy today.
All right. Looking at all the previous and recent issues between South Africans and foreigners, what would you say is or should be done to ensure such acts no longer continue?
We need to engage, we need to increase awareness about immigrant and refugee rights in South Africa. We need to ensure that the locals or South African understand that foreigners that are in this country, they enjoy the same rights such as them. And we also need to expose them to immigration laws and the refugee laws that needs to be respected. And one other thing that needs to be considered is to ensure that the economic and social rights of the citizen and the migrants are observed. We also need to hold the institutions such as police and intelligence accountable, because there's no way that certain activity can happen in this country without them being aware. So they ought to be held accountable, so that at least they pull up their socks, they ensure that they protect the rights of the citizens as well as of those who are foreigners in this country.
Okay. Now, just on what you said, do you think other African countries should also adopt what you just said now?
That's correct. You know, we as African, we cannot be, or we cannot allow Africa to be at war with itself. We need other African leaders to join hands with South Africa to ensure that they fight the scourge of xenophobia, and they do whatever they can to ensure that people in their respective countries, they appreciate that we are one and we need each other as Africa.
Now, as a legal practitioner, as a lawyer or an attorney that you are, do you see legal implications against your government in this regard due to the phobic attacks being carried out on other foreigners by South African citizens?
Yeah, definitely. Members of SAPS or South African Police Service, they have a duty to ensure the safety of South African as well as the foreign citizen. In an event or where an allegation can be made and established that is true, that member of police observed or they are aware of violation of human rights and they fail to intervene, an action can be taken against South African Police Service for failure to execute their duties. There's also a situation where you will find that some of the members of police get involved in some of this unbecoming behavior where they unlawful arrest foreigners. Foreigners have their rights protected, and an action can be taken against police for unlawfully detaining them. And based on that, an action can be taken against the state because members of South African Police Service, they represent our government and they act on behalf of the government. So therefore, any foreign individuals who's being subjected to unlawful action, they do have a right that deserve to be protected, and they can take an action against the Minister of Police by instituting an action.
All right. Now, I think, or I should say, when it comes to policing, most especially in our African continent, there seems to be this bias when it comes to issues. Now, what do you have to tell us concerning do you notice some sense of bias when it comes to handling issues by the South African police against the foreigners?
On that specific question, it's part of human nature for individuals to be biased, irrespective of which country you come from. I should say, in an event where there is some sort of or apprehension of bias from those that should be protecting the citizen, an action can be taken against such individuals, especially where it can be proven that an unlawful action has been taken by members of South African Police Service. Action can be taken to such individuals.
All right. Don't you think such behaviors, like such behaviors against foreigners in South Africa may later affect the economy and the level of migration into South Africa from foreigners, or even doing business with the government of other countries?
Yeah, definitely. Whenever there's uncertainty on certain issues, or there's uncertainty in terms of the laws of the country, it's likely to affect economic activity, and it's likely to deter people from coming to that specific country. So it's without doubt that anything that happened within a country where the laws are not observed, it has a serious implication, which is likely to affect the economic activity in the country. And South Africa not excluded to that.
So what do you think the South African government can do to make sure those laws are highly respected, to protect the image of South Africa and also to protect the foreigners in South Africa?
It is my view that as we have the laws or the act that is aimed at protecting the foreign nationals in this country, it's very important that a continuous training in respect of those specific laws do happen, so that people that have been put in position to enforce or to protect those rights fully understand and appreciate those specific laws. So I think an effort needs to be made to train members of SAPS or South African Police Service, so that they do appreciate what is expected from them.
Okay. Can you tell us if South African government has any law for the rights of foreigners? And if there is any, are the foreigners really benefiting from the rights?
Yeah, like I stated from the beginning, South Africa is a constitutional state and is a democratic state that believes in the constitution, that has been praised by many in a global scale. South Africa went to an extent to develop laws with an aim to protect the interests or the rights of foreigners. For an example, we do have immigration laws, we do have refugee laws, and all those laws are put in place to protect the interests of the foreigners. We also do have your National Health Act, which its aim and purpose is to protect or to give access to foreigners to the health facilities. And if I were to talk briefly about that, you also have your specific section in the Constitution that specify that foreigners have rights to access to health care. Hence, there was some development or there are other legislation to give effect to that specific section of the Constitution.
All right, now talking about democracy, do you think South Africa is really practicing the level of democracy that is being practiced in other parts of the world? And if they do practice it, do you think other African countries too do practice real democracy to your own understanding?
I do think so, that South Africa do practice democracy. But like any other country, there are challenges that some of them can be apportioned to our bitter past. You will understand that prior 1994, we're not a democratic countries. It's only in 1994 where democracy was introduced, where every citizen was allowed to vote and enjoy protection in respect of in their respective rights. I cannot speak on behalf of other countries, but in as far as South Africa is concerned, I think democracy is at work. In as much as there are challenges that needs to be addressed as ongoing, but to a certain extent, I think South Africa do observe the rights of its citizens and foreigners, and that in itself is it pay testament to the fact that South Africa is a democratic country.
Talking about the African part, the other African countries, do you think they practice democracy, looking at the different issues coming up where we see some leaders oppressing the citizens or even doing things that seem to give the citizens no freedom in doing some things? Do you think that is something that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, definitely. There are certain things that happen in other African countries, which I think it requires an effort from all African countries in order to deal with it. If I were to give example or about Nigeria, there was a time where Boko Haram abducted a group of young girls. And that in itself is in violation of their rights, because what it means, they are unable to attend schools. Some of them are forced into marriages, and that it cannot be said to be a democracy. And that's one thing that if we were to compare such countries with South Africa, those specific countries can learn one or two things in as far as the issue of democracy in South Africa.
Okay, now let's talk a bit about the security issues, because generally now we can see that in almost every part of the world there's issue of insecurity. Now, what do you think can be done to tackle the issue of insecurity that is consistently rising on a daily basis, more especially in our African community?
Can you repeat your question?
I said, looking at the consistent rise of insecurity in our African countries, though this is a situation that is happening almost all over the world, what do you think Africans can do to really curb the issue of insecurity that is rising on a daily basis?
In as far as South Africa is concerned, we do have members of South African Police Service, and the powers in as far as that is concerned is vested in them. I wouldn't know much in as far as what is being done in other countries, but I do believe that something can be done to deal with the issue of security. But what the first thing that will need to be observed is to respect the constitution of the respective countries, and to ensure that people who are put in power to protect the rights of other people appreciate the responsibility that come with such responsibility.
All right. Now, back to the issue of the rights of the foreigners in South Africa. Do you think the government of the foreigners affected by the issues in South Africa would punish your government and its citizens in their own various countries?
Can you repeat your question?
I said, do you think, looking at the issue that happens in South Africa, though now it no longer happens and we just believe it will no longer happen again. But do you think, looking at the previous situations that arise, the government of the foreigners affected by the issues in South Africa, do you think they would punish your government and its citizens in their own various countries?
Like I said earlier, you cannot have an Africa that is at war with itself. What will need to happen is that African leaders will need to unite against any challenges that that will come across. Because you cannot afford a situation where Africa it's fighting among itself. The least that can be done is to increase awareness among the citizen, is to also increase awareness in as far as the respective laws applicable. For example, your immigration laws, your refugee laws, and it's also to have you raise public awareness through your advocacy group. You can also create consultative processes between the civic society and government. You also need to improve access to justice by making sure that whenever people are faced with challenges that require them to be protected, our police officer are able to deal with issues in a satisfactory manner.
Okay. Now, based on what you just mentioned, the issue of justice, we notice that most people seek justice using forceful means to seek justice. Do you think in this 21st century, the use of force to get justice is necessary?
It cannot be. It cannot be. It cannot be necessary for people to take law into their own hands. Hence, in South Africa, whenever you feel your right has been violated, be it a civil issue or a criminal issue, you have remedies available in law. If I were to use an example where you feel you are violated and it form part of your criminal matters, you have member of police readily available to deal with such issues. But if one is to take the law into his own hands, it become an issue to an extent that such person, the law doesn't take kindly to that kind of conduct. Hence, people are encouraged to use available avenues to protect their own rights.
Do you think that those people who take laws into their hands by like seeking justice forcefully, when they do that, do you think the South African government should punish them, or do they are they punished for taking justice into their hands without waiting for the government of South Africa to take the justice?
Yeah, in an event where one's rights are being violated, or for an example, you're being attacked, there are processes that have been put in place in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act. One is allowed to go or can approach any police station to open a case, and the legal process will unfold from that to ensure that that specific person's rights is being protected.
Now, back to our leaders. How do you think our African leaders in ECOWAS should come in to tackle the issues rising in Africa?
The issues that happen in African countries are not all unique, but it requires concerted effort from all our leaders to discuss and come up with a workable solution or practical solution in dealing with those challenges. So it's my view that we need leaders who share common values or common purpose, and who ensure that whenever any of the African countries are faced with challenges, they put concerted effort in addressing those issues.
Okay. And do you think the relationship between African leaders is a mutual relationship? Is it a kind of reciprocated when things are supposed to be done? Do you think they give in that mutual understanding to make sure things work fine in all the African countries?
Yes, to a certain extent, I think so, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to strengthen the relationship between respective African countries.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the COVID-19 because that's the hot topic trending in every part of the world.
Yes.
Could you please throw more light on how the government of South Africa is handling the issue of COVID-19?
Yeah, on the issue, COVID-19 issues, uh, when it comes to South Africa, I think they acted swiftly. As early as I think it was in March 26, the lockdown was announced, and a certain committee was formed by government to regularly engage and coming up with measures to deal with the issue of COVID. And I think if it was not for that, we should have lost loss of life. And among other things, in as far as COVID is concerned, the command team or government leaders, they came up with different levels so that they are able to balance the economic activity and protect its citizen. In as much as they have done so, you will appreciate that it becomes a very difficult thing to do to balance the issue of economic activity and making sure that people are being protected against COVID-19. Under the circumstances, one should say they have done their best, but it's unfortunate that when COVID-19 or when the pandemic started, there were already so many issues, for example, such as the infrastructure, which can be apportioned to the past. It has an impact or influence on how government deal with this whole issue. And I'm saying this in my personal capacity or based on my observation, because obviously I'm not in a position to speak on behalf of government, but I believe that they have done whatever they could in their power. What is needed now is a cooperation from us as citizens to make sure that we observe all the regulation, all the rules, and assist the government in fighting this pandemic. Because government alone, they cannot win this battle. So we definitely need to come in and do our bit with the hope that at the end of the day, we will prevail. But I must say the economic activity has been disturbed severely. Hence, certain decisions were taken to ease a lockdown to allow certain sector of economy to participate or to start uh, running the activity and also to save some jobs. But we still see have difficulties within our country based because of COVID-19. But we remain hopeful that uh, will win this battle.
Yeah, we all believe that the battle against COVID-19 will definitely be won. Now, let's talk about the in the area of palliative or stimulus. How has your government been able to manage or support those people who are not living up to the normal standard of life even before the COVID-19? Were there support from government to such families or households?
Yeah, there were various support uh, towards for people basically who live in a challenging situation. For an example, you might not be aware. In South Africa, we have what we call social services, which is mainly to assist the elderly and those who are disabled. But because of this COVID-19, the government has extended their hands to the unemployed. And they also extended their hands to, because you will know that whenever this pandemic such as this one, economic activity gets to be affected to an extent that when there's a lockdown, there's no activity taking place. And what that simple means is that companies are unable to pay their employees, or even if they're able to pay, they're unable to pay them 100% what they ought to pay them. So government in that aspect, they have been helpful. They've made certain funding available to assist companies and also to assist those who are in need. So they've done something in that regard.
Were there job losses in during this pandemic? Because we know that in some other countries, a lot of people lost their jobs. In South Africa, were there some similar cases?
Yes, we did have similar cases. As a matter of fact, I think a few weeks ago, it was announced that our unemployment rate is skyrocketed. And it was expected, South Africa it cannot be, it's not immune to challenges such as this one, because we reliant on other countries. So whenever the economic activity is being affected, it's likely to affect economic activity in the country, which in turn affects employers. And that's where the job losses come in.
So now let's talk a little bit about the educational system of South Africa. Uh, I know there are a lot of people, even most people from Nigeria here travel to South Africa for educational purposes. Can you
Yes.
tell us about the educational system of South Africa?
In South Africa, we do have like public schools and private. When it comes to public school, our government took some measures to allow certain grades to go back to go back to school. They started off with those that are already in grade 12 to go back to class. At the beginning of this week, they also allowed other kids to resume classes. But when it comes to the universities, they are they are attending from home. And what the Department of Education has done, especially in higher education, they understood that there are those who might not be able to access their schoolwork while they're at home due to economic challenges. They made like computers available and assist them with the data. so that they're able to continue with their education during this lockdown.
That's kind of the government for providing support to those people. And now,
Yeah.
I want to talk about what the legal part of the educational system in South Africa. When for those who might want to come to South Africa to study law, what do you have to say about that?
You mean in terms of people who want to come to South Africa to study law?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have people from foreign countries who are here to study law. But the only difference when it comes to issue of law, if you only have maybe an honors degree, LLB, you are unable to practice in South Africa. The only time you'll be able to practice here is if you hold a master's or you hold a qualification in law in an area which it falls under a scarce skill. So it must be a specialized field which is a scarce skill. So that's where you'll be able to practice here afterwards. But in as far as the issue of studying is concerned, any other person, be it from Nigeria, from Zambia, from Zimbabwe, you are they are welcome to come and study here. But you will also know that in as far as the issue of the tuition fees and access to certain funding, there's some limitation when it comes to that. But in as far as the issue of studying is concerned, as long as they meet the requirements to be accepted within the respective institution, they are allowed to come and study here.
All right. Now let's talk about technology a little bit when it comes to the use of technology in the area of security, education, and in every area, because we understand now that technology is now taking over the usual manual things we do. What do you think about the use of technology in the educational sector or the security sector of South Africa? And do you think the government of the African country should a kind of put more in the area of technology?
Definitely, definitely. What COVID-19 has done, it has exposed so many issues in so many African countries, South Africa included. And when it comes to issue of education, it's clear that from now onwards, we'll have a new normal where everyone will need to embrace technology. Like, for example, I'm talking to you right now, you are in Nigeria, I'm in South Africa. So that in itself, it pays testament or it demonstrates that from now going forward, there ought to be a need or more time and resources will need to be invested on technology, because as it appears, that will be the new normal, and that's how things will get done. And especially in an educational space, they will need to embrace more of technology just to ensure that they continue with their academic work even during this COVID-19. So without doubt, technology will need to be embraced by each and everyone, especially for those that want to remain relevant even during these difficult times. Technology is the way to go.
All right. Thank you for that. And now let's talk a bit about the policy in the African community. We understand that it takes the use of politics to select a leader, but it seems somehow like when they get into the office, we see something different. Do you think politics should play more important role, or the consciousness of the fact that attaining an office is simply to serve the good of the people? What do you think should be done to a kind of enlighten anyone who wants to hold any office to put the people first and not the politics that it takes to be in that office?
When it comes to that, we know of so many countries that they have policies or constitution that has been appraised by many, or constitutions such as the one in South Africa. It has been said that the South African constitution is transformative, and it has been praised by so many countries. But what it will take to ensure that what is in the constitution is observed, it will require that those that are in authority are being held accountable. Hence, in South Africa, we have what we call three spheres of government, which is composed of your judicial, legislature, and parliament. And the reason why you have those three spheres of government is to ensure that none of the sphere of government abuses power. And there's also a check and balances of each sphere of government. So that's what we will need. We need in the country, and also we need civic society to participate in the issue of democracy, to ensure that those who are in authority, or that those that have been voted in to lead the country, are held accountable.
All right, now let's also thank you for that. Now I want to talk about let's talk about the issue of racism. We sometimes I try to make people understand that racism is also practiced in some African countries, most especially in our own partner houses. In that there are some form of indirect racism. Now, looking at the level of racism of color that happens in most Western countries, what do you think should be done to put an end to such racism?
In South Africa, in particular, racism is a punishable offense. And you will understand, in South Africa, we had the bitter past. So for us to deal with it, it cannot only be the issue of a rule of law. We also need to balance that with our ethical duty, and to make sure that there's awareness in that space, so that people become aware of what is acceptable and what is punishable in terms of law.
And if I may ask you, would you say racism is attached to a mental state of mind, or is it just an act, a willful act that some people just carry out, or there's something attached to it mentally?
It can be either of the two, but if I were to speak in particular for South Africa, before the dawn of democracy, it was a segregated country where black people were not allowed to, or there were laws that were put in place, or there were laws that were put in place to segregate against black people. So it was a deliberate act that were put in place by apartheid government. So I cannot say it's a state of mind per se, but it's a deliberate act, or it was a practice that has been accepted prior the democracy.
All right. So now, back to the religion. Do you think religion should matter when it comes to choosing a leader in any country, more especially here in Africa? Because sometimes there's this form of bias. This person is not a Christian or Muslim or from any religion. So because of that, we are not going to support such a person. Do you think such should be adopted? Is that a way to choose the right leader?
Not at all. Not at all. In South Africa, we have a section of the constitution that allows freedom of association, freedom to religion. But that alone, it cannot be a yardstick to decide who should be a leader. But leaders should be allowed to exercise their rights with limitation, though, but it cannot be a yardstick to elect a leader based on a religion. That in itself, it will be tantamount or amount to discrimination based on religion. Yeah.
All right. So finally, before we go, what's your advice for Africans, for South Africans, Nigerians? Because I know people are watching you from all over the world. What's your advice for every individual as far as human race is concerned?
We need to understand and appreciate the fact that we need one another. And we need to be aligned to our history. Like, for an example, South Africa, prior to democracy, there are so many people who are housed in various houses in other African countries. So we need that history to be taught in various schools so that people will appreciate one another and they will appreciate the fact that South Africa cannot be able to live or to be able to do anything alone. Be it economic activity, we need one another as countries.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us on the program, Piet Tibane. I'm trying to call you just like a South African man would call you.
Yes, yes, yes.
So
And
we
thank you.
thank you for joining us on the program. And please do have it in mind that we may sometimes bring you back on the program again so that we can discuss some other things. And we really do appreciate your time with us.